Hello, I'm Juliana. And one of the things that I really love to do is to observe and talking to people. Let me start a little bit with a story. Many moons ago, I joined a company that was consolidated in the industry for 40 years, but they started having researchers and designers about 2 years before I joined. So it was inside of that company fairly new. So I start on this company, I jump in, I start a lot of projects. Here you can see me down in the pouring rain in Germany, observing a user. And we start kicking off a lot of different projects together. But we start seeing a problem. You see, this company that been around for 40 years was also in 80 countries. So in these 2 years that they start doing research before I joined, they work with some consultancies, but also they hired an in-house researcher that is my partner in crime, Maria Jose. You can see us both together here in one of our trips. And they had 5 main products. The issue is we were 2 researchers, and these products had to serve 80 countries. Since it was a product that needed a lot of regulations and dependent on local law, we had a lot of requests because each country had a PM from people from countries to understand things or users or how they could adapt the product to their country. And as you can imagine, that can be very crazy for only 2 researchers. But also, we started to realize that even though there were differences between these countries, there was a lot of similarity as well. So some of the questions that they were asking us, we already had answers for. Especially because the products were changing at this point. We were doing a full redesign and revamp of the products, adding new features. How could we give information to all these people that were asking us? How could we provide a value for everyone? So I was a few months in, I already done a few projects, and there was like this 2 years prior to my arrival with a lot of projects already done. And we started to see that we had a problem with our information retrieval because we had a lot of projects with a lot of PowerPoints. If you already seen a research deliverable, there is like a PowerPoint with a lot of information in there. Some knowledge can get lost, especially like if you join a company, you leave the company, your Google Drive or SharePoint or whatever gets shut down and all that information gets lost. So it's very hard to track sometimes, especially in big companies. And we realized at this point that few people had access to this information. So how can we have 2 years of projects done. We have a lot collected. We have a lot of analysis. We have a lot of conclusions. Now what? What do we do with everything that we have? So at this point, we decided to go with a research repository. So I will do like Hannah, raise your hands. Have you ever worked with a research repository before? Have you seen it in your company? Okay, few people. So let's start by the beginning. What is a research repository? A research repository is a way to have a knowledge management system. So it's where we'll be hosting all the data that we collect from customers, the analysis that we do, the learnings that we have, so that it can be consumed by a lot of people. For us, as in the story that I was telling, it was perfect because we had like 80 countries that were asking for a lot of information that some we already had. Let's build a knowledge management system so they can feed on it without us there. So a repository is a very good solution. And okay, it's very simple. Let's see what tools, what fancy tools people are using, and let's apply to our situation. Wrong. I've heard from many researchers that their repository don't work. Like Carmel was saying in the presentation, I'm part of the UX research community in Spanish that embarks not only Spain, but also Latin America. I've been talking to a lot of researchers in the past years since we opened the community. And this is a problem that we see a lot of the times, like, oh, my repository is not working, but they started by the tool. And I have an anecdote for this. I was talking to a team in Brazil. I'm Brazilian. I was talking to a team, a 5 researchers team. And they were telling me they needed like some mentoring because they were start building their repository. So we jump in a call together and they tell me, oh, we are so excited because we have budget for this tool that we are trying to allocate. And I said, oh, wonderful, I'm using this tool. This tool is amazing. Let me see how I can help you put that together. So, but first, let me ask you, what kind of research do you do? So, based on the industry that these people were, they could not record anything from their customers. So they could not take pictures of their customers. They could not record the conversations, the interviews. They just had 2 researchers, one taking extensive notes and the other one asking the questions. The tool that they were going to use, that they were allocating budget for, that is a very expensive tool, does not allow, well, it's a tool heavily done for video editing and photos. So you can upload videos, automatically transcribed, and you do the analysis. This tool was not correct for them. They were going to spend about $8K a year just to have a tool that was not going to be successful for them, for their circumstances. So in the end, we end up working together, and they now have an Excel file as their repository, and it was worked wonderfully. So how do I make it right? First, I need to think what it is that I'm inputting in this repository, right? So I don't have this problem like, oh, I only have text, and now I'm getting a video too. So in the repository goes, what have we done? So what are the research experiments that we done? Did you do interviews? Did you do usability testing? So it's all the data that we are recovering from customers. What it is that we find, so what we find are evidence, like photos, videos, notes, and all other types of artifacts. Sometimes we can ask users how they are. I like to work for B2B companies, and people are usually using the tools for their work. So I usually ask, okay, what else do you use? So if they use something that is paper, I can take a picture. This is an artifact that I will put in my repository as well. And in the end, what we learn. So we go out, we talk to these people, we cover a lot of information. What did we learn from them? And it is basically the insights. Because the anatomy of a good insight is that it's not that every time I do a research project and I go and I talk to a customer, that I come back with a brand new insight, like, hey guys, another insight for us. No, we usually just reinforce the insights that we already found. We can find new insights as well. Or we can deprecate insights that we have, because sometimes the market change. The way that our users are using our tool, our customers are using our tool change. So our insights are alive and they change as well. And we feed our insights with evidence from our studies. Our repository is very good in that, because we can have everything together in like a one-stop hub. So I have a repository, I have my insights, and for who I'm doing all of this? Well, we may think that we are doing for PMs and designers, because they are making decisions based on these insights. and other researchers, because they need to know what it has been already done so they don't repeat a study. And this is true. This is our main audience, basically, product leads, managers, designers, and researchers. But I would add to that, because we talk a lot about customer-centric and customer centricity and how we need to be customer-centric in this company. And for that, everyone should have access to the customer information. For example, front-enders, developers, back-end developers, QA, data team, science people, everyone should have access to our customers' insights and what they are saying for us to be truly customer-centric. In the past, I used to travel a lot, as you see me down in the pouring rain, and I would take always someone with me to be an observer. If I was doing this locally in Madrid, I would take sometimes developers with me to do user interviews. And the reason I was doing that, it's because many times developers are so detached from the customers, right? And you need to have the customer in mind. Talking to a fellow developers colleagues, they told me that helped them write better user stories when they are creating their epics, or help them to truly understand who they are developing for. So bringing people together, it's very important. But it's not only us that are very close to product. Everyone should have access, so it can be truly customer-centric. And this means, like, we researchers pride ourselves to being the voice of the customer, so we need to reach this voice to everyone. And this means C-level people that are making strategic decisions, they need to have these insights in hand as well. Customer support, customer support and research are very close to customers. And we do different kind of work, but we complement each other a lot. So in my last company, customer support and research, we both use the same repository for our information because it was complementing each other. Salespeople, everyone should have access to our customers, because at least for me, the main goal that I have as a researcher is connecting people to information. When I go out and I talk to people and I take photos and videos and I observe them like I love to do in their context, in their work, I gather a lot of data that I bring with me. I digest it. I get some conclusions from it, but I cannot keep that to myself. I need to connect everyone in this ecosystem, and this means every one of you here in this audience, to this information, right? So for me, I've learned many months ago that the best way to do this was through a repository. That is basically a knowledge management system, like I already said. But, okay, I see the need. I have a lot to do for my repository. Where should I start building this repository? Well, building a repository is not trivial. It's not something that you do overnight. It's a big project on itself. It's time-consuming, and in the beginning, it's a lot of work. Once it starts rolling, it's fairly easy. But in the beginning, it's kind of rough. So I like to treat building a repository like a project. And what is the first thing that we need to have in mind when we start a project? Like sometimes we start a project and everything starts going completely wrong. But you do have that North Star that will guide you and will make sure that in the end you reach your goal. So the first thing that we need to do is what it is our goal. Why I'm building this repository. It's a big project. What is the end result that I'm looking for? What are the the things that are not working right now in my organization, and why do I need this? In my case, it was the demand of research from only 2 people to a company that was almost 6,000 employees. So for me, a repository was responding to that need. And how can I be of help of my colleagues? How can I make sure that everyone is truly customer-centric, right? Where do I not go with this project? We need to have our goals and hypotheses very well defined when we start this journey. Like I said before, when I started building this repository in the story that I was telling you, the company already had like 2 years of content done, and I was already in for almost a year doing a lot of projects. So the first thing that you need to do is curate the material that you have. Choose what is relevant. This was a big mistake that we made, Maria Jose and I, because we tried to fit everything into the project. So here, this whiteboard that you see, we actually had that in front of our desks at the office. And this is all the information that we had from 2 years of research done. And we are trying to put everything together in this knowledge management system that we were building. And it's not that we stopped the projects that we were doing. If you have a dedicated research ops person to do that, that is great, but often you don't have that, so you need to do it like a parallel project. And for us, it was a lot of time that we were putting there. And when we started reviewing the materials, like the files that we had, we started to realize that not all of them were truly relevant, because some studies were from products that already we iterated so much that now was so different, and those insights were deprecated, or the information was not worthy to put in this repository. So the first thing that we need to do is locate the documentation and resources that we have, comb through it, see what is truly relevant so I can build the base of the repository. And once I have it built, all the new projects that come, it will be easier to input, because you usually input as you go. But if you have previous research done, to your curation, otherwise you drive yourself nuts. So now at this point, I can start thinking about how this repository is going to be and start leaning towards a tool, but I need to make it useful, right? As I said before, I need everyone to be using this repository. So for me to make it useful, we have like this 4 or 5 things to have in mind. The first one is that a repository needs to be recoverable. So it's important to have a strong search feature in my repository, so I can help all of my colleagues to look for information effortlessly. We need to have consistency in labeling and organizing everything that we have there. I find organizing data fascinating. So for me, this is a part that I really like, but you really need to see how you organize the data so it can be easily recoverable by everyone that is going back to the research that was done in the past. But also, it needs to be accessible. When people are trying to do these searches, they need to understand what they are looking for. And for that, we need the help of a thing that for me is the very first step of the repository, is one of the most important parts, that is the labeling system. How I identify everything, it will make the information more or less accessible for everyone in the company. And how do I do that? I do that with a taxonomy. The taxonomy is this labeling system that is the base for our repository. Usually, a taxonomy is something that you already have done. If you are doing analysis, qualitative analysis, because you're already, when you're doing the analysis, you're already labeling things as they go, observations as you go. Because a good taxonomy is basically the system to classify and organize the raw research data. So you already have a base. Could I have a taxonomy that fits every company and everyone? No, because a taxonomy is very specific from your context, your industry, your customers, internal jargons that you have. So for me, starting with a taxonomy is super important, because when you kick the repository, you already have everything labeled down, and it's already useful for understanding and reaching out the data. But you need to start somewhere. Start with the keywords that you already use when doing analysis. And start simple. You don't need to have like the super big taxonomy with everything inside, especially because a taxonomy, as well as the repository and the insights, are something that are alive. Like every time that we do research, and we start finding more and more and more about our customers and how they evolved using our products, things change. So we start with a starting version with labels that you already use. I can give you a couple of examples. Pain, gain, and nice to have are labels that I see in a lot of taxonomies. But also, let's remember that a taxonomy is a way that people will use to find things in this repository, this labeling system. So ask for feedback. Don't use complicated labels, and ask for feedback, and have this taxonomy available for everyone that will be using the repository. I'm not saying like that they should do the taxonomy with you, but ask for feedback, show it to them, see how they feel about it. And also, apart from accessible, it needs to be actionable, because if we think about decision makers coming here to understand the user insights, when we are writing these insights, they need to be actionable, right? They need to lead to a decision. It's not that us as researchers are making decisions, we are just providing conclusions about what we learn from customers. But when you are writing insights and you are providing people with this information, ask yourself, how can I ensure that I maximize the value and impact of everything that I have in this knowledge management system? And also traceable, because when decision makers are using these insights, sometimes they ask, where does this come from? And this happened to me a lot of times. Like people tell me, a PM tell me, well, okay, I have this insight that you have here, but I need to understand where this comes from. I need to understand a little bit better what is behind it. So for that, you need to be traceable. So yeah, I have this insight, and this comes from this and this and this and these user interviews that we've done, from these different projects, these different observations. So you can have evidence-based insights. Insights are only useful if you have the evidence behind it. And the raw data that you have in the repository should back the insight. And last but not least, it needs to be safe. I'm talking about raw data, I'm talking about videos, I'm talking about photos of our customers. Sometimes we have the company that they work for in there, if we don't anonymize the data to that level. And now I'm already going towards a tooling system. It needs to be safe, right? Our users are giving, our customers are giving us their face, they're giving us a lot of information. We need to be sure that this remains confidential. I had like people from the marketing team in the past coming to me and say, hey, I found this quote from a user that you interviewed, and with this photo, let's use on the marketing material. That I need to stop them on the tracks and say, hey, we don't have that on our NDA. We cannot use their data. We need to be a little bit gatekeepers of how people use this data, especially because, yeah, most of them are confidential. So when you are starting considering a tool that you already went through all of the steps and is already in this tooling part, how secure is this tool, right? How secure is the software? What level of encryption do they have? How do they do the data handling? Where do they have their servers? And these are all questions that they usually have on their documentation, so it's fairly easy to find, but it's something that we need to keep in mind. But also we need to keep in mind data deletion. Part of GDPR is that people can come and say, hey, you interviewed me 6 months ago or a year ago, and I don't want you to have my information anymore. I need to be able to go back and delete everything that I have from that customer. Otherwise, I can be in a GDPR pickle, and it can be very problematic. So how much this tool allows me for data deletion is always something that I need to think about. So if I'm already thinking about a tool right now at this point of my creating a repository journey, where do we start? Well, there are a lot of very nice tools out there. I used plenty of them, but keep it simple. You can start very simple, and you can iterate as you go, and you can grow as you go, and you can go to a bigger tool or to a dedicated repository tool when you are ready. Start asking yourselves, what is our team using already? Because if we think about what I said before, that the most important thing for me as a researcher is connecting people to information, many times when I'm adding a new tool to their workflow, it's possible that they won't use it. What are they already using? I've seen people building repositories in Notion, in SharePoint, in Jira, in, I don't know, Google Drive, in Confluence, although Confluence is not the best tool because it's very complicated to manage the information there. But we need to start small and build from there, and we need to input, looking at the repository, reading insights into the workflow of a lot of people in this ecosystem. A lot of you here are developers. If I would say to you, hey, I have a brand new tool from user research that now you can incorporate in your workflow, you would say, great, I would love to learn from users, and then you would never open the tool again. And I know that because it happened to me a lot of times. So using something that people are already using, show them the value of having access to this data is more important than having the super tool. And when people are already used to consuming this information, you can jump to the tool from your user research and scale bigger from there. Also, we need to, and thinking about this, we need to think about the learning experience. People will be having access to this information. How do I present it? I've done a lot of mistakes in the past with repositories, and one of them, in my previous company, we started writing articles for the insights with a lot of information and tracing back and blah, blah, blah. No one was reading those big articles because they were a lot of text, and people don't have time to do that. And also building a how-to to use your repository, I don't think it's a good idea, because as we all know, nobody reads how-tos. So think about your colleagues as your audience. Think about how you can ensure that they reached out and hear the information you want them to hear. Be creative. I've seen other researchers creating podcasts. So when people are commuting, they can listen to their user insights. Or creating posters if you have an office and putting them around the office. So be creative on how you reach people and how they consume your information. And after you do all this and you build a repository and you have a lot of information in there, how do I know it's working? Because it's, I've heard in a podcast recently of someone that is talking to a lot of senior researchers that only 30% of their repositories are working. So it's very important for us to be mindful because, as you could see, building a repository is a huge project. It's very time consuming. And I need to know that all this time and effort that I input is being useful for others. If not, why did I do it, right? So for me, the best way to know if it's working is talking to people. As I said before, I love to observe and talk to people. So usually what I do is every couple of months, 3 months, I reached out to a few people in my company and I asked them, hey, let's talk, let's have a coffee, 15 minutes coffee, and I can ask you about your usage of our wonderful repository and you can give me a feedback. So I ask how they are using, how it's being useful, if they are not using, why they are not using, and I can adapt and create a truly good experience for them all. So if you all have here a user research team in your company, I really hope that after this talk you reached out to them to find out what your customers are thinking about. Thank you so much.